Joe Harroun's next. Joe came to us from Cargill a few years ago, and he's been very active in trying to understand the influence of biofuels. And so, Joe, I'll let you inform us.
Thanks, Jeff. Good morning. Appreciate all the customers coming here and spending a half day to a day with us today. I know your time's valuable, so I'm going to get right at it. Being in the grain industry for over 30 years, I think of the long tail as really being part of the supply part of the short crop. You know, back in 80, 88. I'm going to just discuss a little bit how we flipped it this year, and it seemed like the long tail was on the demand side, driven by mandates and profitable margins. I'm going to make you uncomfortable. I'm going to dig into the renewable fuel standard for a little bit. So put your, get your glasses on. It's daunting to actually learn about that. So I thought I'd at least give you the highlights on that, and then try to give you, somewhat like Scott Irwin did and Daryl Good yesterday, or I think over the weekend, they put out a nice farm doc on the potential outcomes of what decisions EPA might make. Surprisingly, we came to a pretty similar conclusion that corn demand is going to be tough to mess with from an RFS standpoint. And that's really what I wanted to take away with. Somewhere between 4.951 billion bushels of corn demand is pretty tough to shake lower. And I think everybody's knee-jerk reaction August 7th when the EPA came out and said, hey, we're going to take another look at this. We have to really look at what they mean in the context of look at this. And I think that's what I hope to do today. Telling the story of the long tail demand is pretty easy. I'm going to do it because every ethanol plant is different, whether your location, ability to buy stuff. I'm just going to look at it like a pork guy would or a livestock guy would, from just outputs divided by inputs. And it's just board crush. So when we opened the year this year in Jan, Feb, and March, and we looked at ethanol margins, there's really nothing going on. It was like, oh God, we're going to make, this doesn't look that good. And then the RIN thing started up, and you really look at the oil and gas lobbyists came out January 29th and says, hey, we're going to take this to Supreme Court, we're going to get rid of it. You know, and that got, oh, okay. And then RIN prices started taking off quite rapidly. This is a chart of the RIN price for ethanol. The green and the blue on the bottom is the historical price of RINs, a couple cents. And then 2013 really stands out with that announcement being the catalyst for making RIN prices go up. And you can say whatever you want to say about the why of it, but it is an illiquid market. It's very small, and it's like cash. Okay, so then I always love bringing the CME, and whenever they come up and say, hey, we're going to introduce a new contract, it's like, what's their batting average? Like 100, on the success of these contracts? So that's almost like the kiss of death. In other words, they saw this thing go way up, and they said, man, we're going to make a ton of money offering RIN contracts to the industry. And I think the open interest is less than 1,000 right now, and they offer this thing. So I always use that as a barometer of just sarcasm, because it's like they always want to get greedy. And that's fine, but it really didn't matter. And then, when you really look at the latest announcement, and that is, hey, we're going to take a look at this on August 7th. We're going to look at adjusting the advanced and the total mandates. And the RIN market said, oh, wait a minute, they're going to make it easier, more comfortable for us to comply. They extended the amount of time that they're going to give the obligated parties, that's the big oil, to come into compliance instead of the 13, this is all calendar year based. Instead of making them become accountable on February of 2014, they're going to extend it to June of 2014. Doesn't mean that they lowered their obligation, it just means they gave them more time. What does that mean? Well, there's a lot of RINs that go unused. Illiquid, inefficient market, not every counterparty gets hooked up, and so there's like millions of gallons of RINs that go unused. And so I think by giving them more time, they're hoping to make it easier to comply. So that really, I think, was the catalyst to get the industry, kind of woke up in January. And then crush margins started to improve, just looking at board crush and excluding DDGs, corn oil, CO2. And ended up, the second quarter was just a massive run on margin that really helped a lot of ethanol plants print positive results in that quarter. Get a little hiccup in Q3. It really depends whether you do the board crush against July, which was inverted over, massively to sort of give you a picture of what the cash basis is doing on margin. Not so good, right? actually saw some negative board. Or do you compute board crush on buying the third quarter against SEP, right? The July, August SEP, bought against SEP was a lot better margin, obviously, than what we really had to do, and that is buy it against the July. A lot of things came together on the cash side to make these margins better than board margins, and so we accelerated and bought the corn. Right now, we're looking at sort of a ho-hum margin situation. October is highly inverted over December. If you get out into December part of Q4, it's not as good a margin as October. October looks quite good. And then if you look at next quarter, January, February, March of 2014, you know, nothing negative, but nothing really to write home on. If you look in the spring, you know, April, May, June of next year, kind of the same deal. The board is not showing the ethanol plants much margin. So in the end, there's some cash things that developed. One of the things is that we're seeing DDG trends go up in the Asian markets, not so much in Mexico due to sorghum supplies, not so much in Canada due to barley supplies. Both of those locations are down between 20 and 25% on year-to-date shipments in DDGs. But the Asian markets are up, offsetting everything. And that's a big deal when you look at DDGs as a percentage of the value of corn. Upwards, you know, we used to think about DDGs being 60% the value of corn. Today we think of it being about 100% the value of corn. And the question is, will that trend continue? And we think it's got a good chance of staying pretty strong. Can't talk about the RFS or get to the RFS discussion without talking a little bit about biodiesel. And really the message here from a board crush in biodiesel is that soybean oil has never been as cheap relative to heating oil as it is now. In other words, the demand to make biodiesel is huge right now. And the margins, when you look at it in terms of company stock, like Renewable Energy, REG, their stock is at about 16 bucks, well off their lows, as well as a public company in ethanol, Green Plains out of Omaha. Their stock is about $16.70, flirting with their recent high back into, well, not recent, historic high back in 2009. So bottom line is the financial situation is much better. The amount of debt being retired is huge, and this industry is becoming very healthy. Do you want to hit enter on that one of those keyboards there, or Travis seems to? All right, transitioning a little bit. I always try to give like things for Trent and Kurt and Jeff to pull on in their merchandising discussion. One of the things that you always have to think about with ethanol is where the heck is it produced? And Iowa is a freaking monster, 28%. 28% of all the ethanol expected to be produced in October will come out of Iowa. There's going to be some interesting things that Trent can talk about with regard to that. What percent of that crop is mature right now? 5% as of the September 8th maturity ratings. So while we're covering, basically this chart shows you how we're covering the South and Southern Illinois, Indiana, the basis dropping, the SEP-D spread collapsing, we have 40% of that ethanol kind of outside of that early crop area. And that's, you know, when you go up into North Dakota and think about covering first half of September through last half September through first half October corn basis, after ADM basically drained it out of there and sent all of their stuff here, it could be some very interesting transitions. So I'm just saying, ethanol is everywhere. The Illinois waterway delivery system is very finite. And this demand base is very spread out. That's all I'm trying to say. This is just another way to look at how many demand sectors of, you know, agriculture of that spread out and that big, you know, that need that kind of coverage. And it just gives you pause with when you start thinking about, oh, basis covered, you know, we're done, it's over. Think about it, you know, it's a big industry. All right, we're going to delve into the renewable fuel standards. I like to think of it actually as a farm program. Let that resonate. Why? I entered the industry in '84. The stocks were off over 4.5 billion bushels. Everybody gets hepped up about, God, it's a subsidy program. You know, agriculture is a subsidy program. It has always been a subsidized industry ever since I entered it. We've always been fighting stocks, and this is just one way that happens to have worked. And so everybody looks at how it started. Well, it's Bush, really. Energy Policy Act of 2005. What did that do? Oh, we thought we'd go after some nuclear technologies that were more greenhouse gas friendly. We thought we'd build more anaerobic digestions and greenhouse gas storage areas, and oh, this little thing called biofuels was in there back in 2005. The 07 actually said, boom, we're going to put a mandate on it. 6 billion gallons in 06, we're going to do it. RFS 1 and 2 are really revisions of that. But when you look at it from an environmental ag, it's an ag program, just so happens it had great timing. MTB classified as a carcinogen, smog issues in Denver, low carbon fuel standard, you know, the nuts and fruits out in California. And you just looked at the price of energy, $100 again, you know, a barrel. Just look at it. I mean, it was just a perfect storm of three converging things. And ag took advantage of it. There's so many years at Cargill that we talked about ethanol as a joke. Went from 84 to about 95. And then they started getting serious about it because things started evolving. And it's evolved into a fairly, you know, somebody at the dinner table asks you what is RFS 2. It's essentially a biofuel mandate with limits on cornstarch ethanol, food, right? And it's got carve-outs for higher performing biofuels. What's a higher performing biofuel? In their terms, it's something that produces less greenhouse gases, measured against how much greenhouse gas does it take to make the unleaded, pure unleaded gas. If you can give me 50% less, you're advanced. 20% less, you're conventional corn. And that's really what it is. We're going to max out corn at 15 billion, and then we're going to try to make cellulose that get us to 36. Good luck. The other flaw in this thing, when they set the standard, they had this trajectory of gasoline demand 15 billion gallons higher than what it actually came out to be. That's the blend wall. You can only stuff so much ethanol at 10%, which is what the car manufacturers wanted at for liability reasons, into this thing. And here's the forecast here. CAFE standards, you know, all of this. But in the silver lining of all of this, when you go to high compression engines, is you need octane. What's octane worth to an obligated party, Shell or Chevron? A gallon. It's a buck. Buck a gallon. What are the other sources for octane besides ethanol? MTBE, oh, that's a carcinogen. Alkylates, oh, that's a $1.50 a gallon. Toluene, oh, that's a $1.25. I know, it's just more expensive. So until some of your sons or daughters go out there and invent a better octane substitute at lower cost, ethanol's it. It's the best one we got. Okay, so when you look at the numbers, 13.8, 14.4, 15, that's the conventional. Conventional's corn, that's the mandate. Advanced, carve-outs, right? Carve-outs, 2.75, 3.75, 5.5. What's all in there? Cellulosic is a piece, biodiesel is a piece, and about a whole host of 15 other things that brilliant scientists are working on. And then you have the total renewable fuel standard. That's the 3.75 and the 14.4 gives you 18.15. And what USDA August 8th said is we're going to look at this, and we're going to look at this. They didn't say they're going to look at this. And that's what Irwin's study did. That's what our studies show. That all they did today, as of today, is they gave them more time to comply. That we know. And we acknowledge that 2013 is good. You guys are going to make it. And 2014, we're going to take a look at these two categories. Let's take a look at that in more detail. What are in the categories that EPA is going to take a look at? Cellulosic. Not much success there. Everybody saw that Hugoton had all those stocks of corn stovers on fire. I mean, stuff heats up when it's added with water and heat. It doesn't, you know, there's going to take some engineering ingenuity to get cellulosic to work. Project Liberty's in there. There's about 5 or 6 with known pathways, but they added up, it's about 50 million gallons, of which we'll get 6. Just not there. Biodiesel, most successful one we got. Things going to go through the roof. Margins are incredible. I just think there's a lot to be done in biodiesel, and I also think that inside of that is renewable diesel. So you have the difference between biodiesel and renewable diesel. Biodiesel is made from fat and methanol reaction. Renewable diesel is basically hydrotreating, throwing in the fat with the crude oil, pressure steam. You know, that's how we make gasoline. Very, very much growth here. These other things, honestly, it's outside sugarcane ethanol, which is considered advanced. Sugarcane ethanol, the most that Brazil's ever sent out of the country is 1.35 billion gallons. That's the most they've exported. They're on track for about 440 right now. That's sizable. It's important. The Californians want it because it looks green. Okay? There's going to be a whole host of other things. Biogas, ethanol from grain sorghum could be a huge deal. Don't talk about it too much in Illinois, but it's a boon to sorghum growers out west. And they like it in California. And it's a 5, 6, 7 cent gallon premium from having that low carbon indexes, not just for the EPA, but going in to meet California statute. If you look at biodiesel, it's just on fire. And the things that you want to remember from this is that we're on pace to do about 1.873 billion gallons. All we really need to do to knock out the biodiesel is about 1.536. So we're going to do more than the mandate. And we're going to allow that contribution to go against other mandates. So you got to hit the 1.28 billion gallon volumetric mandate. Anything above that is going to help go against the advanced mandate. This is a huge deal. This really takes EPA a lot off the hook. You can also import this stuff from Brazil and Argentina if stocks get tight. It's viewed as probably, next to ethanol from corn, the second most successful part of our list. How do you know, policy is really, you can trade RINs, you can trade RIN spreads, and as obligated parties, this is really serious stuff. It's almost equivalent to trading corn spreads or bean spreads. What does it require to trade anything? An S&D, right? Okay, who also looks at this? Policymakers, right? Are we going to be deficit advanced RINs come 2015? There's a very good chance of coming up short. And I do this analysis just to sort of show a scenario. It's really a scenario. I pretty well can forecast 2013, but I can throw out scenarios for 14 and 15. And when you look at just the absence of cellulosic production, the biggest failure, it really starts creating a hole when your mandates start going from 275, 375 to 55. At some point, your biodiesel, we cannot consume, we can't make enough of it, can't import enough of it, we've got to revise it. And that's really the heart of the matter, is that the advanced category, because of cellulosic, unless there's a lot more commercial success, is going to get revised. The D6, or the corn conventional ethanol, is more workable even out to 15. And that's predicated upon you guys starting to buy E85. We only used 40 million gallons in 2012. We may use 176. That's what EPA is forecasting for 2013. There's only 2 states that report statistics on E85 or higher blend use. Okay? It's not a huge bankable concept that E85 is going to pull its way through. But you also have imported ethanol that adds to it. You can also, if you lower the advanced category, you can take biodiesel and you can take sugarcane ethanol, and instead of fulfilling this massive cellulosic deficit that we're going to cap, you can let that flow into covering the corn conventional ethanol mandate. So it's not that corn has to solve the D6 problem on the S&D. It's that you take away the advanced and the total, bring it down, and allow those other advanced to basically cover the corn ethanol mandate. And that's kind of how I see it happening in a lot of other people. The primary reason is down here is if automobile manufacturers still stay with the 10% mandate, we're going to come up short in terms of how much domestic consumption we can use on corn ethanol, and then that's why the biodiesel is important, the imported other products are important. The one, so this is the forecast. You leave the conventional alone, and again, they could change it, but my viewpoint is they won't. You lower the advance and the total a similar amount, and that's pretty much it in a nutshell. You can't rule out this change in the conventional. You just can't, but it's highly improbable, and the market's not looking for that. So in summary, I think corn demand 4.9 to 5.1, advanced mandates and totals, is vulnerable. The biodiesel blend wall, if you look at, there's about 50 million. The basic blend wall in biodiesel is hit between 1.9 and 2.5, and the volumetric mandate is 1.28. So we still have more room in the biodiesel blend wall than we do in the ethanol blend wall. So that's what helps allow this to happen.
So what is the biodiesel blend wall? What is that?
It's B5 into total diesel demand,
Because there's only so much the engines can take, or there's only,
The manufacturers on some will go to B20, but the EPA is viewing it year-round due to cloud point issues, winter, at about 5%.
okay.
And I think they're doing a very conservative job of coming up with this 1.9 to 2.5 blend wall on biodiesel. It could be higher. But that's essentially biodiesel demand against a B5 demand. It's not as diesel demand,
Sure.
putting the 5% in. And really the last point I want to make is that milo demand could grow quicker and faster than corn demand. As we look at the situation in the carbon fuel standard in California, the premiums that are being paid for milo are pretty significant. And then you could also throw on that a new pathway that EPA might develop for milo that doesn't require an anaerobic digester. Because most of the milo, to really get the EPA value, you have to have an anaerobic digester. You have to be getting your natural gas out of the system, and that's a very expensive proposition. So I would encourage you to look at Irwin and Good's article that was released that Trent shared with me over the weekend. It's another way to look at it, and I think they do a nice job of it. And you know, if you want more detail on cellulosic, there's some more there. But that's kind of what I prepared for you guys today. If any questions, let me know.
Hey, Joe,
Yep.
on the cellulosic, how much are you putting into some of the cellulosic pathways that these enzyme companies are trying to get pushed through for approval, so that essentially with regular corn, you're getting cellulosic credits?
Very little.
You don't think they're gonna get it through?
No, I think they will, but I want to be really conservative with my views right now, and I totally excluded that.
Okay, because I know there's several of them out there working on it along with some additional processing equipment, and didn't know what you thought there.
I think there's 4 plants that are having great success with it.
Right.
One was in Wisconsin that I got exposed to, and I think it looks positive from this cane energy sugar being, put into the flow of fermentable material. But I just excluded it.
Okay. The other thing, just kind of a comment more than anything, you were talking about milo and the growth of it. Just one thing I'd throw out there, processing milo is a lot more difficult. So these plants that think that they're gonna just switch to milo, they're not gonna do it.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a lot more, there's a lot more to it to process milo.
We've got a lot of customers in southwest Kansas that Jeff and Kurt Kelly work with that have figured it out. And they're pretty, I don't know what they've done to their processes.
Anaphones.
They're running a lot of milo, and
Yeah.
I think the brokers in the back would concur with that, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
And that has to be exclusively milo, right, to qualify as an advanced?
No, not at all. They
They're
can-
blending?
Yes,
Oh.
yes. There's not enough milo to not blend. I mean, you might get a little window, and I'm speaking a little out of turn, Jeff, Kurt, and Kelly could address that a lot better than I could, but it seems to me that it's almost a seasonal window with harvest and availability, and the blend changes.
So they get proportional advanced rings then?
Yes. No, not these customers, because they don't have the anaerobic digester. All they're doing is capturing the premium to go to California. So it's really, that whole idea that we could grow this more would require a new pathway from the EPA without the anaerobic. That anaerobic digester is a $20 to $30 million investment that most people have, except I think there's a co-op in western Kansas has made the investment. The first name starts with West, but not a customer, but they're actually building the anaerobic digester.
That has to process everything and supply all the energy for them.
And they can only take so much electricity off the grid.
Off the grid.
It's very restrictive. But the main benefit for milo is just simply getting the premium out of California.
What's their expectation in California? 50%, 30%, 70%?
Grow it, I mean, in terms of the share.
How much milo?
They would take, there's not enough of it for them to get.
No, I mean, you're saying that it's part milo, part corn.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure. I think they take what they can get, really, from that standpoint, and optimally would be 100% milo, because that would give them the CIs in the 60s, which are equivalent to Brazilian CIs, and that gives the most bang for the buck to the obligated
There
party.
must be some floor though, if you only did 10% milo, you might not get the higher price in California, or maybe they do it on a pro rata basis. If you did 10%, they give you 10% of the higher price or
I
something.
don't know the answer to that one, Dave. That's a good question.
Joe,
Joe, you might comment, was there any wheat that made its way into
Yeah.
ethanol?
Yeah, just asking if, you hear about Indiana, Missouri, the POET plants buying wheat. I think so. I don't work with POET directly, so I don't have any firsthand knowledge of it. They certainly had a bid. They certainly bought a substantial amount. And if from a third-party viewpoint, I would guess them at when corn basis was through the roof, they were running about 12%.
And then there was a story out about, somebody was talking about efficiencies of high octane and changing engines around. Did you happen to see that, and could you comment on that?
I hope my point got through back, a few slides ago. I won't go to it. That really underpins the value of octane. Ford being a leader out there with high compression, trying to hit the CAFE standards. If you're going to run those high compression engines to keep them from knocking, you're going to need more ethanol in them. And that's a message that GM, Ford, and other auto manufacturers have basically told the industry. So I think it's a very positive message for us.
And I think, is it true that the higher compression engines allow the miles per gallon for ethanol to improve, if I understand that?
I only got knowledge out of my beater that I put E30 in, and I'm still getting it. So I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that. It'd be great if it happened, but I'm still thinking that when I read the EPA documents to prepare for this presentation, they're still using 22% as a E85 energy hit. And everybody out there probably is running E85 in their SUVs and get different mileage. But EPA uses 22% hit on mileage from E85. Good deal. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it.